Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for logging into the session. So, good morning, good evening to wherever you are located. So, let's get started for today's topic that I have for STC India 2020. The session that we'll go through in the coming 30 minutes is Kubernetes data protection and focusing more on the performance and the scalability aspect of it. So let us see what are the few things that we need to bear in mind while we think of data protection. How do we go about validating the performance and scale of data protection? And what are the unique challenges that we faced? And what are the result summary that we could come up in the last 1 year or so by doing this study? So the rough agenda is let us spend just a couple of minutes to talk on the cloud native and the Kubernetes ecosystems. Then let's get to the Kubernetes data protection in specific. Then we'll go to the performance studies that we conducted and what are the monitoring infrastructure that we have set up. And then let's check the experimental topologies that we have covered in our validations. And finally, let us see what are the key summarization of the results that we can arrive at based on all the studies that we have done in the last 1 year. So basically, moving to topic of containers. So we are very familiarized with the concept of virtualization. So VMware has led the journey in the last more than a decade or so, popularizing, and the industry has embraced the virtualization based on the hypervisor. But in the last second half of the last decade or so, you'll see the popularity of containers, and especially in terms of building the microservices app, transitioning to the cloud, building cloud native applications. So that is where we see a very much market adoption for the containerized systems. All right. So what are the advantages of containers? So they are very lightweight. They are standalone in terms of packaging. They are very resource efficient, and you can just build them and run anywhere, right? So this is some underlying concept before we check into the Kubernetes. So containers is what we need to be clear on in terms of the infrastructure. So then once we know what is container offers us, so what is the Kubernetes then? So Kubernetes is a very popular open source orchestration platform for these containers. And it helps us in scaling, deploying, and automating all the container basic lifecycle that you would need for running a production grade application. So it helps in provisioning of host, instantiating of containers, exposing containers to external services, and scaling up and scaling down kind of requirements. Right. So this is a very a basic understanding of Kubernetes that I guess the audience might already have. So what is a very minimal topology look like for a Kubernetes if someone wants to go ahead and build it in-house or whatever we see in the cloud? So at a very minimum, you will have a Kubernetes master node and then a bunch of worker nodes, which can run into hundreds or even thousands. So master node is where all the key functions like controlling the scheduling operations, the key value data store, which is the persistence tier for all your Kubernetes components runs. And so basically the Kubernetes admin will talk to this master node, right? And master node internally will communicate via the kubelet services running on all the worker nodes, where actually your pods would be residing. They would be created. They would be bought down. They would be bought up. So all the pod lifecycle operations happens in the worker nodes, right? And then you can connect it to the end users based on the services that you offer. So in that sense, Kubernetes has really been a very useful, and it has captured the market heavily in terms of the open source orchestration platform. Of course, there are other flavors, but then Kubernetes stands tall in this ranking. So then let's come to a more closer to our topic today, like that is Kubernetes data protection. So before we dig deeper, let us just go through these four columns to see how do I visualize of what should I think of data protection for Kubernetes, why should we concerned, what should we back up actually, and what are some design recommendations, design considerations, and eventually what will be the customer ask when you offer a product for Kubernetes data protection, right? So why do we back up? So Kubernetes in earlier days was very popular for stateless applications, but you can see the popularity has also penetrated into the stateful applications, and stateful applications need protection. And you also need to keep the disaster recovery in mind. You need to be able to restore back your failed pods or the persistent volumes for the Kubernetes. You also need to be able to migrate your Kubernetes clusters from one region to another. And also, you should be able to offer some replication services or the copy reuse case kind of requirements that come from your customers. So now, if we talk of what should we back up in terms of Kubernetes, so in a very short, you can tell the entire application that is residing in the containers, which is orchestrated by Kubernetes. So what is it made of? From the previous slide, we saw that a Kubernetes deployment would have pods, there would be secret keys, there would be services that are running, you would deploy your pods as deployments, you would create certificates to manage the authority, and there will be configuration maps between all of these pods. And of course, end of the day, when you want to retain the persistence of these pods, you would come up with persistent volumes or the persistent volume claims that we know. So when I say Kubernetes data protection, it means an end-to-end protection for all of these above checklists that we have. All right. And how do you offer this solution? How do you build a Kubernetes enterprise scale data protection service? So this is where the third column will discuss. It should be policy driven. Users need not have to manually go to the granular level of pods, namespaces, PVC. So everything should be policy driven orchestration. Then it should be infrastructure agnostic on the sense Kubernetes today is very popular in the cloud. It's also popular in the hypervisor kind of topologies. And of course, then there is a bare metal topology. So there is a mix of flavors that you can think of the deployment stack for Kubernetes. So you need to be able to be infrastructure agnostic whenever you're offering the data protection services for Kubernetes. Then it is not only enough to just back up this from primary to secondary storage, you need to offer enough of data reduction whenever you are offering the data protection. So reduction can be thought of as compressing the whole backup stack. You can find all the dedupe segments and then give enough storage savings to our end customers, right? That is what a successful data protection outcome would look like. Then other than being able to back up these pods or Kubernetes assets just at a crash consistent level, you need to be able to offer more of application awareness, application consistency as well. In the sense, your pods might be running SQL or NoSQL databases. You need to be able to preserve the consistency or the point in time restore capability of these pods, right? That is where application consistency has to be factored in. And then to simplify the DevOps life, your Kubernetes administration day-to-day job, you need to offer both as a centralized as well as a self-service capability. So some of them will be happy with the centralized service, and there might be other DevOps who would prefer the self-service capability for controlling your backups, right? And then it goes without saying, all of your services should be based on REST API support. There should be enough automation in the system to be called as a successful data protection offering. So these are all the functionalities that we spoke of. But what are the end customer implicit tasks, right? Which may not be called out in any PRDs, but then before making a purchase decision, before making a sales decision, there will be some things beyond whatever we discussed, right? So what is the scale of clusters or the number of nodes that I can protect from one solution compared to the other, right? So how many persistent volumes? Because you're talking of the storage layer, right? And this can be as intensive as you can think of. So the number of PVCs that a solution can protect also significantly is important for coming up with a efficient data protection offering. Then what are my backup and restore data transfer rates, right? So how fast can I back up, or can I schedule some concurrency in the system? Can I schedule the restores to be faster whenever the requirement arises? And eventually, the lastly but not least is what is my protection footprint on my primary stack, right? So I'm doing a data protection, which is not a primary stack if you think of the customers who are using it. So when I'm doing the protection, what is my overhead on the cluster itself, right? It should not be too high to the extent that it starts impacting the primary workloads. So this one particular deck is summarizing why we need the Kubernetes data protection. What do we back up in terms of Kubernetes data protection? What are the design considerations for a solution offering Kubernetes data protection? And then what are the other customer implicit asks that one need to bear in mind whenever you baseline or do a performance and scale validation for data protection offering? So in the market, you have many vendors out there who have started to pick up Kubernetes data protection as a specialization. But the quite popular and one of the very simple and basic utility, which is again an open source, is called Project Velero. So Velero is codenamed as Heptio. It was around 2018. It was bought by VMware, but then the source code still remains public. So at a very simple level, this is what an open source Kubernetes data protection offering will look like. You will have a Velero client and Velero server running. So you would communicate to the Kubernetes API server, and API server will talk to the backup controller, which is the Velero controller, which will be watching for what are the incoming backup requests coming, right? And then this Velero controller will query what are the Kubernetes assets that I need to back up, right? And it will do the query to the Kubernetes API server back again. And once it gets a list of pods, namespaces, PVCs that it needs to back up, it would go ahead and do a snapshot. It would create it as a tarball and then send it to the backup storage location. And this happens to be the cloud storage location in current state, right? So you can do a direct copy from your Kubernetes clusters to your backup target, which is S3 buckets. But then this is a very simplistic representation. Of course, there are more use cases possible. But then Velero itself cannot scale to the enterprise needs that one would think of, like, can I create a policy-based orchestration? Can I do a multi-processing of my backups? Can my backups be multi-threaded? Can I have a cross PVC snapshot support? Can I have a single backup going into multiple backup storage locations? So those are all the advanced use cases, and currently they are still being worked upon in the development. So this is where enterprise grade data protection vendors come into picture. So let us see one of them, which is from Dell EMC. It's called Dell EMC Power Protect solution. So especially for Kubernetes, if you see at a high level, this is what the topology would look like. We cover end-to-end protection of Kubernetes from the bare metal stack to the hypervisor stack, and the latest offering from VMware, the VMware Tanzu family, and then the very popular Google Anthos, the GKE, the Amazon EKS, and even the other popular offerings like Red Hat OpenShift. Right? So basically, the architecture deploys two controllers called, one is Power Protect namespace, and then the other namespace is Velero. So both of these together orchestrate the metadata backup as well as the PVC backup for Kubernetes data protection, right? But this is all just the business part of it. This is all the high level technology stack of it. But coming to the core topic that we have today, how do I visualize, how do I come up, or how do I arrive at a performance and scale validation of these solutions, right? So now that we have looked up a very basic backup workflow, and then we have seen enterprise grade backup workflows, how it looks like, let us see how do I visualize, or how do I break up my whole study into the performance and scale outcomes, right? So in the top 5 things that I would consider for the performance measurements is, what is my CPU and memory overheads while I'm doing the data protection? Like, as I said, the footprint should be the one of the very important things to watch for whenever we are offering a data protection service. Then what is the backup and restore concurrency? Like I said, Velero itself could do all your backup needs, but then it has certain concurrency limits that is there in the design today. So when you want to measure the performance of your solution, we need to bear in mind uh, to what extent we can go for our backup and restore concurrency. Then whenever we want to protect the persistent volumes, so again, storage plays a big role. That is where the PVC storage characterization comes into place, right? So am I in line with the PVC storage characterization? Am I able to utilize all the IOPS that is being offered by my CSI vendors in the backend, right? That is the container storage interface that we use for integrating external storage to the Kubernetes cluster. Then what is my backup throughput characterization? So am I able to sustain a steady state backup throughput, or is my throughput varying because of the size of the PVC, the nature of data residing in the PVC? So all those factors should also be considered whenever you're calling out the performance measurements. Then there is topology overhead consideration. So what do we mean by this? So you could do your study on Kubernetes bare metal, then you have to compare it with the equivalent in Kubernetes VMware stack or the hypervisor offering, and then again extend the same study to Kubernetes in the cloud, right? So you need to see what is the topology differences between your results from the bare metal to the virtualization to the cloud, because only then you can make a concise and a confident measurements to our field customer that what they can expect from the various topologies, right? And then when we are done with the performance characterization, we would dig deeper into the scalability aspect, which is where, as I said, as a customer, you would be interested in, okay, I buy your data protection solution, but how far can I scale? How many PVCs can I protect? Are there any scalability limits in terms of number of clusters? Are there any endurance measurements that I need to be aware of? Because these solutions tend to run for a very long duration in the your data center. So we need to be watchful of all of these measurements whenever we say we want to do a performance and scale validation. So now that we are getting closer to our topic for today, let us see what are the key unknowns. Like I said, before any case study, it is good to also know what you don't know. All right. So we know what we want, where we want to go, but what are the unknowns in our journey? So today you may go and search for any competitive reference, like, do I have any baseline already against which I should compare? But in terms of Kubernetes data protection, there is very little, putting in the internet out there for you to compare. And then in Kubernetes, there are interesting special interest groups called SIG communities. And then there are work groups. And these communities constantly pick up a certain module in Kubernetes and focus on that. So we went ahead and checked what are the Kubernetes data protection SIG communities talking in terms of the performance scale. So but unfortunately, not much of stats are available there for you to just consume and begin your study, right? So you have to be watchful that of the inputs that are coming from the SIG community as well. Then, whenever you want to make an enterprise grade offering, we need to be very clear on what should be our concurrency limits, what are the stable values of concurrency that I can put. Like I said, having too low concurrency or too high, both are two edges of the sword. If you have too low of a concurrency, your backup solution time would be higher. At the same time, if you get over ambitious and have a lot of concurrency in your data protection stack, you might also end up overwhelming the customer Kubernetes cluster, because you might impose a lot of footprint and the performance overheads on the primary stack. So we have to be watchful of what is a balanced concurrency approach, and then draw the measurements from there. And then there is something called pod eviction. So whenever you are deploying your data protection components into the primary Kubernetes stack, you would deploy some of your pods as well into the solution. So you need to be watchful of, are you doing good on your resource consumption? Or if you do not define, or if you're out of your resource limits, you might end up evicting your own pods, and then the backup may start failing from that point, right? So you need to be owning up whatever you deploy. You need to be restricting your components, whatever we deploy, whenever we think of protecting the target customer clusters. Right? So these are some of the key unknowns. Now let us next see what can we what will be our starting point, right? And as you progress, you will see that there will be a lot of runtime challenges, runtime surprises that would come. So you would think that you have a well-defined performance at scale strategy, and you start executing upon them. And guess what? The, the ecosystem for Kubernetes is so wide and so dynamically moving that flavors keep on getting added as you progress, right? So you would see the popularity of Kubernetes uh, leading to your latest version being outdated in less than a year or 2 years of time. You would see many popular offerings coming up, and you need to keep on baselining against at least the majority of those, right? So you might have started with bare metal, and then suddenly you will see the traction is building on Kubernetes on VMware, then Kubernetes on AWS stack. So the essence of this slide is your test plan and your scalability approach should be very agnostic and very flexible to all these kind of surprises that you encounter, right? So this is just to call out this. And though the point of Kubernetes is to simplify your DevOps life, but then once you start deploying the stack in your data center, you would see that it is not as easy as it sounds like. So you need to be very watchful of which bare metal host that you are selecting, and how do you deploy your stack, how will you integrate your backend storage, how do you deploy your CSI stack, how many clusters you can build, right? This is just a simple topology describing how a bare metal Kubernetes looks like in the lab, right? So there are two clusters, one on the top and one on the below. Both are consuming the storage from Dell EMC Extreme IO using the CSI plugin. And then you are integrating this with your data protection storage, which is the Dell EMC data domain. So the topologies tend to get complex as you scale. So you need to be watchful of how efficiently we are able to build this, because uh, the topologies need to be seamless before we make any scalability and performance studies. Then once we cover the bare metal, then we start translating the same topology into the hypervisor stack, which is the VMware stack. And you can see a sample depiction of it here. So all that we spoke of in bare metal is now translated into the VMware stack, right? And you have the similar Kubernetes familiar terms like namespaces, pods, worker nodes, master nodes. So everything is have to be mapped to the VMware stack. So the journey doesn't end there, right? So you also have to build a parallel setup whenever you want to compare the scalability in the cloud ecosystems. So you can see we started from the bare metal. We had to build a uniform and repeatable topologies across all the form factors. So this is where as a performance scale engineer, you need to ensure that your topologies are easy to build, you're well automated, and your tests are repeatable, right? And how do we say that? How do we conclude your test? Right? Can we say I executed or I have found out X, Y, Z measurements and I'm done? Or what should be our approach? So typically, being a data protection vendor or validating data protection offering, so you have to work with very ambiguous and very limited requirements at times. So you need to keep on iterating your tests until you meet the service level indicator or until you are getting closer to your service level objective, right? So these are the two key terms from a data protection perspective. So you need to be honoring these two metrics as and when we keep on iterating the test. You define your KPIs, check if you are meeting the backup RPOs, the restore RPOs, and what is the best KPI threshold that you meet. And then when you're doing these measurements, have I captured the pod metrics? Am I doing good on uh, the customer footprint itself? And then do I need to be changing any resource constraints? Do I need to ensure my nodes are having enough quota to run these data protection services or not? And then you keep on iterating this circle. So this is just to let the audience know that we have to operate in an iterative model without having a defined exit checklist kind of thing, all right? And then comes another important piece. Whenever you're talking of Kubernetes, it is a lot different than how you measure your stats on the bare metal or the VMware kind of virtualization stack, right? So think of pods. You need to be able to monitor at a pod level, then at the Kubernetes worker node level, then at the cluster level, and then you need a simple to use dashboard to see your runtime metrics. You can't go ahead and manually keep on using the CLI tools or running your shell scripts to do all these jobs, right? That is where selection of monitoring stack becomes a very important decision before you start your execution. So we had to compare a couple of offerings there. Can I use the Kubernetes dashboard itself? If I use what is that I can leverage? I can leverage it for getting a different CPU and memory across nodes. But then what am I missing? I am missing the pod level metrics if I use Kubernetes. Then we also explored, can I just automate the Docker stats command, which is offered natively in the once you install Docker. So it is good to use, but then there is no aggregation capabilities. You need to do this in every worker node, and it becomes very challenging to consolidate the Docker metrics across all the hundreds of nodes, right? And then there is CA advisor, container advisor. So it was a little better than Docker stats. It collects CPU, memory, network stats for all the containers. But then uh, we do not have out of the box pod level aggregation. You have the container level, but then containers residing in your pods, you need to uh, you do not have a seamless aggregation of metrics at the pod level. And then we ended up using an quite popular Prometheus and Grafana as a combined solution. So Prometheus being the time series database and Grafana being the dashboard for capturing and aggregating the Prometheus metrics. So we arrived at using this combination because it was offering both at the node level, at a pod level, and it was very easy to plot your dashboard, get all the metrics runtime. So these were some of the comparisons that we did before we shortlisted on our monitoring stack. So just to simplify how the end monitoring stack would look like. So you would have your Docker containers. They would be exposing their metrics to CA advisor on the worker nodes. And from these CA advisor metrics, the Prometheus will grab these metrics and then send it to Grafana dashboard. Right. So this is our simple depiction of how we are using the Prometheus and Grafana for our day-to-day Kubernetes instrumentation. Then comes the important things. As you start executing your test, and you might be getting various runtime observations. Some of them will be normal, some of them will be notorious, right? So you may recall that Kubernetes as a development platform is using Golang. So there are a lot of code that you would see that is utilizing the Golang libraries. So even from a data protection offering, whenever you are integrating with Kubernetes, you would come up with your offering using the Golang, and you would see that the memory leak pattern is quite common in terms of uh, whenever you are doing your backup or the restore jobs. If you do not contain your backup pods limits, you might end up seeing this kind of pattern, right? But this is a not a it might look scary, but this is not definitely your application's logic or the developer's fault. So Go, it happens to be that Go holds on to the memory if it sees that there is no other OS pressure. It will keep on starting accumulating this memory. And from the documentation, it looks like it is an optimization mechanism, right? It's in the case there is no other memory pressure in the operating system, in this case, the Kubernetes worker nodes. So you would see that this kind of pattern showing up in the Go libraries, right? So this is where we need to emphasize that as a backup offering, you need to be watchful of the usage. You need to cap your usage also, right? Otherwise, it might end up leading to memory leak and eventually out of memory as well. Right? So this chart is just to depict why we need to watch for the out of memory candidates whenever you're doing the performance and scale for your data protection. Then the other aspect is in Docker stats or in the Kubernetes metrics, there is nothing called right metric or a wrong metric. It is all interpretation based on your use case to use case. For example, the CA advisor, uh, which is our agent, which pulls the Kubernetes or the Docker level metrics, you will see that it has a multiple breakup for the memory itself. So there is a container memory usage bytes, then there is container memory working set bytes, and then there is container memory RSS. So there are multiple uh, breakup of the memory metric itself. So now you need to decide what works for your data protection stack. How can you leverage the specific metric, right? Because if you end up making a decision based on only one metric, that might mislead, that might be not the right way to go. All that you need to be watchful is, how do I ensure my data protection components do not get into out of memory ranking, right? So for that, you need to be watchful of two metrics importantly, that what is your container memory working set bytes, or what is your container memory RSS footprint that you see, right? So these are the a couple of runtime learnings that we had on the way, that whenever we gather the metrics, we have to be watchful of which metric to choose, so one over the other, right? For example, we had the chart on the right that you see. So we were doing a characterization of what is the impact if I protect a PVC of, say, 50 gigabytes versus a 500 gigabyte, right? So do I see a difference in the memory usage when I'm doing the data protection for the varying PVC size itself? So when I was measuring using the container memory working set bytes, visually it looked like, there is a difference in the amount of memory that gets reserved in the Kubernetes, right? But then we need not panic, because then we went and saw, can I see a further more breakup of the metrics for memory? Then I went and instrumented container memory RSS, and then it looked like whether the PVC size is 50 gig or 500 gig, the backup time may take longer, but then the memory metric itself was uniform. So this goes to say that the Docker reporting for the memory may not always be straightforward. You need to be able to make a decision by thinking from multiple metric and multiple angles in that, right? These are some of the runtime notorious observations that I felt I should call out for this audience. Then next thing, so all our performance scale are ongoing studies, right? Nothing is exactly right or wrong. Always you need to be in a continuous R&D mode. So what are the other studies that we are doing recently? So we are just exploring what will be the advantage or disadvantage of co-scheduling the data mores. So what is co-scheduling data mores? So as you know, for uh, data protection of Kubernetes persistent volume claims, we rely on the CSI capability. CSI is a container storage interface that multiple data storage vendors offer as plugins. So we use the snapshot capability, right? So you snapshot the primary PVC, mount it to the Kubernetes cluster, and then use that mounted PVC to do a data protection, data transfer, right? But what is the impact if I create my data more pod, right? You just can't have a pod, a PVC. You need to have a combination of pod and PVC to make it as a candidate for backup. So what is the impact if I have my pods and PVCs scattered across nodes? In the sense, I do not have any affinity rules, right? You might have a data more one in worker node one, and the PVC for this data more can be in the worker node two and three, right? So they are not closely associated in terms of their location. So this can be one challenge, that you might internally incur a lot of data transfer cost and the operational overheads by having this kind of scheduling. So hence, what should we do, or what are the options that we can explore to have a co-located or co-scheduling data more pods with their respective snapshotted PVCs? So we are exploring on this kind of enhancements and just checking what is the impact of the resource usage when we have co-scheduling pods versus the regular scheduling, which is what Kubernetes scheduler does out of the box, right? So can we enhance or add some more intelligence to this scheduling algorithms so that we reduce the CPU footprint, the network transfer cost, and then further enhance the data protection offering, right? So these are some of the ongoing studies that we have to carry on. And like I said, after doing all the studies, you need to be able to summarize your study in a results, that how easy it is to scale from say 100 to 1000 PVCs or 100 to 1000 pods. Do you see any degradation in your values, or do you see a uniform? Uh, do you see uniformity of results? So those kind of studies have to be summarized, and this is where we had to just depict that how seamless it is for the Kubernetes bare metal and the VMware to scale from as low as 100 PVCs and go all the way from 1000 and even more based on the backend storage availability and the topology uh, uh, availability that we have in the lab, right? So we had to complete this study and make a presentation and then improve from that part. And like I said, one is the scalability, and second, you also need to be able to summarize what will be a sample footprint of your data protection stack in the primary cluster that the customer would be having. So you need to measure what is the Velero footprint, what is your controller footprint, what is your data more footprint, and then improve from that point, right? So unless we have a baseline, you can't improve. So after doing all of this case study measurements, we have a baseline to work on, we have a baseline to improve, and that is where we are going to in the coming releases, right? So this was a short summary of the data protection from a performance and scale aspect. So I hope you enjoyed the last 30 minutes and you were able to get some takeaway from this session. So we'll welcome any feedback that you may have. If you have further questions, we can connect offline, or my mail ID is there. So thank you for listening, and I'll hope to hear back more from you if you have any questions. Thank you.